There comes a moment in life when noise stops being motivating and starts becoming poison. You feel it quietly at first, the endless opinions, the pressure to explain yourself, the need to be seen, to be updated, to stay relevant in rooms that do not even value your peace. At some point, the soul gets tired, not because it is weak, but because it was never designed to live under constant observation. And that is when a dangerous but necessary thought appears in your mind. Maybe I need to disappear for a while. Not forever, not to run away from life, not to punish anyone, but to return to yourself. Most people fear disappearance because they think visibility is power. They think if they step back, they will be forgotten. If they go quiet, they will lose influence. If they stop chasing, they will fall behind. But Stoicism teaches something far more unsettling and far more liberating. What is real does not need constant display. Strength does not scream. Discipline does not beg to be witnessed. A person who is becoming powerful often looks invisible from the outside. The world has trained people to confuse presence with importance. If you are always posting, always replying, always available, always proving, then people assume you matter. But the Stoics would ask a different question. If your worth disappears the moment your audience does, was it ever truly yours? To disappear for a while is not weakness. It is selection. It is a refusal to let the crowd interrupt your inner government. It is choosing depth over display. It is choosing order over chaos. It is choosing to build something so real inside yourself that applause becomes optional. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire, yet his deepest thoughts were written in private, never intended for performance. Think about that. One of the most powerful men in history did not spend his nights trying to impress strangers. He spent them trying to master his own mind. He understood that the greatest war is not outside, it is within, not against enemies but against impulse, against vanity, against anger, against fear, against the desperate need to be approved by people who have not even learned to govern themselves. So when you disappear, what are you really doing? You are withdrawing your energy from places that waste it. You are taking your attention back from people who feed on your reaction. You are stepping away from the theater so you can remember who you are without an audience. That kind of silence changes a person. At first it feels strange. You reach for your phone. You wonder who noticed your absence. You feel the itch to explain yourself, to post something subtle, to let people know you are still there. That impulse reveals how deeply conditioned most people are. They do not merely want peace. They want peace with witnesses. They want healing that can be seen, growth that can be admired, solitude that still receives validation, but true withdrawal has no performance in it. It is you, alone with your habits. You, alone with your thoughts. You, alone with the parts of yourself you used to drown out with noise. And that is exactly why most people never do it. Because when the world goes quiet, you hear what was always waiting underneath. The insecurity, the grief, the rage, the confusion, the emptiness, the unfinished conversations, the excuses, the shame, the deep suspicion that maybe you have been living reactively, not intentionally. Disappearing removes your distractions, but it also removes your disguises. The Stoics did not believe comfort was the highest good. They believed clarity was, and clarity often arrives wrapped in discomfort. You sit in silence long enough, and you begin to see how much of your life was built around avoiding yourself. How many decisions were made from fear of rejection? How many routines were shaped by the need to be accepted? How many relationships survived only because you kept shrinking to fit them? How much of your suffering came not from events themselves, but from your interpretation of them? That is where transformation begins. Not when life becomes easier. Not when people start understanding you. Not when luck finally arrives. But when you stop escaping the truth. You disappear for a while, and in that absence, something sacred happens. You begin separating what belongs to you from what never did. Their opinion is not yours. Their projections are not yours. Their confusion is not your identity. Their lack of vision does not define your future. Their inability to value you does not reduce your value. The Stoic path is brutal in one sense. It demands responsibility, not for everything that happens, but for how you meet what happens. That is why disappearing is powerful. It shifts your life out of reaction and back into authorship. Instead of asking, "Why are they doing this to me?" you begin asking, "What part of me keeps participating in what destroys my peace?" Instead of asking, "Why am I being overlooked?" you ask, "What am I building while no one is looking?" Instead of asking, "How do I get them to understand me?" you ask, Why do I need understanding from people committed to misunderstanding me? Those questions hurt, but they clean the mind. And once the mind is clean, the life starts changing. Not always visibly at first. In fact, the first changes are almost invisible. You stop explaining yourself so quickly. You stop reacting to every slight. You stop feeling compelled to answer disrespect with attention. You stop chasing closure from people who benefited from your confusion. Your emotional economy becomes stricter. You no longer spend outrage where silence is more powerful. You no longer pour devotion into places that only return depletion. You begin to understand one of the quiet laws of life. Whatever you keep feeding will keep growing. Feed resentment, and resentment becomes your atmosphere. Feed distraction, and distraction becomes your identity. Feed ego, and ego becomes your prison. But feed discipline, and discipline becomes your freedom. Feed solitude, and solitude becomes your teacher. Feed the soul with order, and even chaos begins to lose authority over you. This is what people do not see when you disappear. They assume nothing is happening because nothing is being announced. But inwardly, entire empires are being rebuilt. Standards are being raised. Habits are being corrected. Boundaries are becoming law. Vision is returning. Energy is becoming concentrated. You are not absent because you are lost. You are absent because you are under construction. There is a reason the Stoics spoke so much about self-command. A person who cannot command themselves will always be commanded by something else, by pleasure, by fear, by public opinion, by approval, by lust, by envy, by comfort, by anger, by the endless thirst to be noticed. The crowd calls that freedom because it feels immediate. But Stoicism calls it slavery. If your mood can be controlled by a text message, a comment, a delay, an insult, a comparison, or someone else's mood, then you are not free. You are externally owned. Disappearing is how you begin repossessing yourself. You step back and let the withdrawal symptoms teach you. Every urge to check who mentioned you, every craving to break the silence, every fantasy of making your absence dramatic enough to be regretted, every temptation to return before the work is finished. Each one reveals the chains you were still wearing. And that is good news, because what can be revealed can be broken. Many people only use time away as a strategy to be missed. That is not disappearance, that is manipulation. Real disappearance is not a game. It is not done to trigger guilt. It is not done to create mystery. It is not done to make people chase you. It is done because your spirit can no longer afford cheap contact. It is done because your mind needs recovery from overexposure. It is done because your life has become too important to remain scattered. There are seasons when the most productive thing you can do is become unreachable, not because everyone is against you, but because access is expensive. Every conversation costs focus. Every pointless argument costs clarity. Every fake friendship costs emotional energy. Every attempt to be understood by the committedly shallow costs self-respect. And every day spent living for appearances costs the future you could have built. The Stoics knew that attention is moral. Where you place it shapes who you become. If your attention is always leaking into gossip, comparison, outrage, and validation, then your character will slowly bend in that direction. But if your attention is guarded, disciplined, and directed toward the things within your control, then your inner world becomes stable enough to survive almost anything. That is why silence is not empty. It is strategic. In silence, you notice your own patterns. You notice how quickly you assume the worst. You notice how often you rehearse imaginary arguments. You notice how much of your suffering comes from trying to manage how you are perceived. You notice how often you say yes when the soul means no. You notice the habits that make you weaker and the routines that make you clean. And once you see clearly, excuses become harder to keep. That is the uncomfortable gift of solitude. It removes your ability to hide behind confusion. You begin to see that not every connection deserves repair. Not every invitation deserves acceptance. Not every emotion deserves expression. Not every thought deserves belief. Not every wound deserves a public explanation. Stoicism is not emotional numbness. It is emotional discipline. It is the refusal to let temporary feeling dictate permanent damage. So you disappear and you begin practicing restraint. You do not answer instantly. You do not defend yourself to everyone. You do not interrupt your peace just to satisfy someone else's entitlement to your energy. You do not run back to what made you sick just because it once made you feel chosen. That last lesson is a hard one, Many people return to damaging places because they miss the feeling, not because the place was good. They confuse familiarity with alignment. They confuse longing with wisdom. They confuse intensity with meaning. But the Stoic asks, does this strengthen my character or weaken it? Does this bring my mind into order or scatter it? Does this help me live with dignity or merely distract me from loneliness? If the answer is degradation, then distance is not cruelty. It is self-respect. The strange thing is, once you stop making yourself available to what drains you, your life starts rearranging itself. Not through magic, through law. Your sleep improves because chaos no longer has unlimited access. Your thinking sharpens because constant interruption is gone. Your confidence deepens because you are finally keeping promises to yourself. Your standards rise because desperation no longer negotiates for you. Your presence changes because it is no longer diluted. People feel this before they understand it. When you return after a period of true withdrawal, something is different. You speak less, but your words land harder. You do less, but it carries more weight. You smile, but you do not seek approval in return. You listen, but you are not easily pulled into nonsense. You are calmer under pressure, harder to provoke, less available for games, more anchored in your own judgment. Some will call you distant, some will say you changed, some will accuse you of thinking you are better than them. But often, what they really mean is this: they can no longer access the version of you that was easy to influence. And that bothers people who benefited from your lack of boundaries. Stoicism prepares you for that moment too. Not everyone will celebrate your growth. Some people preferred your confusion because it made you easier to control. Some preferred your insecurity because it made them feel superior. Some preferred your constant availability because it gave them power without responsibility. When you disappear and come back different, you expose every relationship that depended on your self-abandonment. That exposure is painful, but it is clarifying. You begin to see who loved your essence and who loved your convenience, who respected your silence and who resented losing access, who encouraged your discipline and who mocked it, who saw your withdrawal as wisdom and who saw it as rebellion. And once seen, these things cannot be unseen. This is why everything changes. Not because the world suddenly became kinder, not because fortune turned in your favor overnight, but because you did. Your perception changed, your tolerance changed, your standards changed, your relationship with attention changed. And when those things change, your whole life begins operating under new rules. The Stoics understood that outer events are often less decisive than inner posture. Two people can face the same insult, the same setback, the same betrayal, the same uncertainty. One collapses into bitterness, the other becomes more lucid. One spirals into reaction, the other turns inward, governs themselves, and becomes stronger. The difference is not luck, the difference is training. Disappearance is training. It teaches you how to live without constant reflection from others. It teaches you how to create value in private. It teaches you how to endure boredom without medicating it with noise. It teaches you how to sit with discomfort until it tells the truth. It teaches you that loneliness and solitude are not the same thing. Loneliness is the pain of missing others. Solitude is the power of finding yourself. And once you find yourself, many pursuits lose their glamour. You stop envying loud people because you begin to see how often loudness hides emptiness. You stop admiring public validation because you realize crowds are easily impressed and easily distracted. You stop rushing because urgency is no longer confused with importance. You stop taking every opinion personally because most opinions are confessions, not insights. You stop begging life to be easier and start asking yourself to be stronger. That is one of the deepest Stoic reversals. Instead of demanding a softer world, you forge a steadier soul. When that begins happening, even pain becomes material. Rejection becomes instruction. Delay becomes training. Silence becomes information. Loss becomes purification. You stop asking, why is this happening? And start asking, how can this refine me? You stop treating adversity as a curse and start treating it as a furnace. Not because suffering is good, but because meaning can be drawn from it when your mind is properly ordered. That is what disappearing gives you, the space to reorder the mind. And once the mind is reordered, action changes. You become more deliberate. You choose fewer things, but better things. You speak with more intention. You protect your mornings. You stop leaking your plans before they have roots. You learn to let results speak before your mouth does. You stop announcing every transformation in its fragile stage. That last part matters. Too many people talk themselves out of growth by exposing it too early. They tell everyone what they are about to do, and the announcement becomes a substitute for the work. They seek encouragement before they have earned momentum. They want witnesses before they have developed substance. But the Stoic path is quieter than that. Plant in silence. Train in silence. Heal in silence. Build in silence. Let the world meet the outcome, not the rehearsal. There is dignity in becoming without narration. There is power in private discipline. There is something almost sacred about not needing to be seen while you are rebuilding your life. And yes, it can feel lonely. There will be nights when you wonder if anyone notices. Mornings when the old urge to reach out returns. Moments when invisibility feels like insignificance. But stay with it, because if you endure that stage without betraying the work, a new kind of strength arrives. Not the loud strength of dominance, not the brittle strength of ego, but the quiet strength of self-possession. The kind of strength that does not need to prove itself because it is already rooted. The kind of strength that can walk away without theatrics. The kind of strength that remains calm when others panic. The kind of strength that can be alone without becoming empty. That is when everything begins to change in ways people cannot explain. Your decisions become cleaner. Your circle becomes smaller and truer. Your energy stops scattering. Your body carries less tension because your spirit is no longer negotiating with every external demand. Your goals become less performative and more precise. Your relationships improve, not because you became more pleasing, but because you became more honest. And what leaves your life in that season was often never aligned to begin with. This is important. Disappearance is not about hating the world. It is about refusing to be consumed by it. Stoicism does not ask you to detach from life. It asks you to detach from dependency. You can love people without needing their approval. You can serve others without abandoning yourself. You can participate in the world without becoming ruled by its chaos. You can care deeply without losing inner order. That is the balance. Withdraw, not to become cold, but to become clear. Step back, not to punish others, but to stop punishing yourself. Go silent, not because you have nothing to say, but because what you are building deserves protection. And when you return, return differently. Return with less need. Return with sharper judgment. Return with stronger habits. Return with peace that was earned in solitude. Return with standards that cannot be negotiated by loneliness. Return with the kind of discipline that makes your life speak before you do. People will notice. They always do. But by then, something crucial has changed. Their noticing no longer controls you. That is freedom. Not being admired, not being chased, not being envied, but being inwardly unowned. The Stoics spent their lives trying to cultivate exactly that state. A mind that remains its own under pressure. A spirit not enslaved to praise or fear. A character guided by principle rather than impulse. Disappearing for a while is one way of entering that training in a modern world that constantly rewards fragmentation. You do not need to vanish dramatically. You do not need to announce a grand retreat. You simply begin, you protect your attention, you reduce unnecessary contact. You stop feeding what weakens you. You return to discipline. You reclaim your mornings, your thoughts, your standards, your body, your time. You become harder to reach because you are finally becoming reachable to yourself. And then quietly, everything changes. The way you think changes. The way you love changes. The way you work changes. The way you endure changes. The way you carry silence changes. The way you respond to disrespect changes. The way you value your own life changes. And with those changes, your world begins to reorganize around a stronger center. That is the secret most people never learn because they are too afraid to step away long enough to meet themselves. They stay visible and remain lost. They stay available and remain depleted. They stay loud and remain shallow. They stay connected and remain unknown even to themselves. Do not make that mistake. If your soul is tired, listen. If your mind is crowded, clear it. If your life feels performative, step out of the theater. If your peace keeps breaking under the weight of other people's access, close the gate. Disappear for a while. Let them wonder. Let them project. Let them misunderstand. Your task is not to manage every narrative. Your task is to master your own nature. Go where the noise cannot follow. Go where your habits are forced to answer for themselves. Go where your thoughts can no longer hide behind entertainment. Go where the false self starts starving and the real self begins to breathe. Stay there long enough to become unrecognizable to your former weakness. And when the time comes to re-emerge, do not return as someone seeking proof that the retreat worked. Return as someone who no longer needs proof. Because the deepest changes are not always visible at first. They are felt in the pause before reaction, in the calm where panic used to live, in the boundary that no longer trembles, in the silence that no longer feels empty, in the standard you no longer betray, in the discipline that remains even when no one is watching. That is what Stoicism offers the serious soul, not escape, not fantasy, not the illusion of control over the world, but mastery over the self. And a person who has learned to master themselves does not need to chase everything. They can wait, they can observe, they can choose, they can walk away, they can begin again. So if life has been too loud, too scattered, too demanding, maybe this is your sign. Not to quit your life, not to become bitter, not to punish the world, but to withdraw long enough to remember what cannot be taken from you unless you hand it away. Your attention, your judgment, your discipline, your character, your inner throne. Guard those things, build those things, strengthen those things, disappear for a while if you must, and then watch everything change.